We continue our coverage of the naval plane crash on the east side of Mount Rainier. This is an EA-18 Growler jet that took off from Whidbey Island yesterday afternoon with 2 Navy pilots on board. And the search continues this morning for the jet and the 2 crew members. Let's bring in aviation expert and former pilot John Nance. John, good morning to you.
Good morning, Bill.
Now, John, we understand that this was a training flight on this EA-18 Growler, and this is a similar jet to the Blue Angels, and we're all familiar with those. How rare is it for these type of jets to crash?
Well, it's very rare, and certainly in training missions, but it's not unknown. These are very powerful airplanes, twin engine, plenty of sophistication in the navigation. And so even though we have no clue at this point, other than the airplane has disappeared, what it sounds very much like is a thing called controlled flight into terrain, when you have the aircraft under control and it basically is piloted in the wrong place. But we don't know that for sure. The fact that we didn't have emergency locator transmitters corking off and no communication from the pilots is a very grim indicator.
And so do you think the pilots ejected?
If they had ejected, they have plenty of equipment, including radios, to be able to get people to, know that they're on the ground and where they are. I was hoping that would be the aftermath of the initial report yesterday, but we have not heard that. So if they have been in contact, if they are on the ground, that would be wonderful. But I think by this point in time, we would already have heard that.
And we've seen an extensive aerial search. It continues this morning, and as far as we know, they haven't found the plane. Any idea why it's taken them so long?
Well, you've got an aircraft that if it flew into terrain at probably 250 or 300 knots, it's going to punch a small hole, and you're not going to find a lot of stuff looking at snow. That's part of the problem when you're looking at an emergency situation involving a snow-covered mountain or any portion of it or any flank of it, and forests on top of it. So, no, it's not unusual that a situation like this, if it was CFIT, as I say, controlled flight into terrain, it would be a very small scar on the horizon.
What is the protocol in a search like this for a military crash?
Protocol is we go, I say we, I'm Air Force, but Air Force, Navy, we go all out, do everything possible to locate not only where the aircraft is and where the crew is, but what the condition is and if there's any possible rescue.
So speaking of the conditions, we were just speaking with meteorologist Brian McMillan about the air and weather patterns around Mount Rainier, and they're different around the mountain, especially up high. How does that impact flights around Rainier?
For small airplanes, it can be extremely dangerous because you have air flowing over the mountain and it's displaced upward and then it's displaced downward again, and you have a thing called a rotor that very often develops. When you see that cap cloud over Rainier, for instance, on a clear day, that's the indication of a very high rate of ascent and descent of the air, and you fly into that, you can end up turning upside down, for instance. A powerful jet like the EA-18 is really not affected much by that. You can power yourself out of just about anything. What
would be the protocol for pilots in a situation like this? I know they're highly trained, but this was a training flight. Are they trained for this kind of emergency? And what would they be doing if they were able to understand that they were in trouble and need to eject?
Well, I'm not sure that this has the indication, if there was no ejection of anything that they could have prepared for. These crews highly trained, not just in the electronic warfare portion, which is what these jets are all about, the Growler, but in terms of the flight characteristics and the power of the airplane and how to use it, navigational elements. These are all absolutely top flight.
Tell us a bit about the Growler and what it does.
The Growler basically is an aircraft that provides all the sophistication of the earlier Grumman aircraft that could go up and jam enemy radars, jam enemy radios, do all sorts of very sophisticated electronic things to deny the enemy the capability of being able to communicate and guide whatever ordnance they're guiding.
And just to circle back on the point you made earlier, if it's the type of crash that you suspect, it may be tough to find any wreckage.
Well, if it is that type of CFIT, as I say, controlled flight into terrain, it will be found. By the same token, it's just not easy to do in the first number of hours, especially even in daylight if there's a snow cover.
Right. John Nance, aviation expert, always good to have you. Thanks so much for your perspective on this.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.